a special guest,
Ooh.
Santa.
Uncle Charles McCulloch, Santa.
There you go. With McCulloch Mortgage Team, and his investment group is Family First Funding.
Correct.
So Charles will talk to us about that. But basically what you need to remember is the McCulloch Mortgage Team. Yep. And so, Ken, I think you are the person responsible for getting Charles here. Do you want to give any more introduction for him?
I think Carrie was probably made more of the phone calls.
Carrie was.
It was actually just a text. But it worked. We got him here.
I'll have to tell you that we tried to do this back on Cinco de Mayo at the Fiesta party at Alamo Title.
Yeah.
And Charles was the only one that would really sit down and talk to us about it. And we had great conversation. But then we got back to the office and all we could hear was the music and the wind blowing that day. Yeah. So we had to just say, Charles, would you make another guest appearance? And he was very...
But I didn't tell you what we had to pay him to be here.
Oh, well.
We'll
keep that off the record.
Okay.
Good, bad, or otherwise, we've been sitting here having a conversation for the last 10 minutes and realized, holy crumbs, we should be recording this for the podcast.
It's excellent information for everybody.
Okay.
So,
Charles, get us back to where we were. What were we talking about?
Thank you for letting me be here for one.
You bet.
And it always just takes a text message and a cup of coffee if you guys really want to know the compensation piece.
There you go.
It's great information and it's a great discussion anytime we're able to open the floor to just have a conversation, right? And so one of the things that we're talking about very specifically is, on the sales price of stuff with houses in the current market that we're in, a lot of opportunity is there if you're willing to pay for that opportunity.
Right.
So I want to share a story with you guys real quick. That's a very personal story, and it's my story. And back in 2003, Carrie and I were looking for a house.
Not me. Not
that Carrie.
He's married to a Carrie. Maybe that's why you answered my text.
And we talked with somebody that did mortgages, and they asked us a very important question. And it's the same question that everybody on my team asks every single borrower, every single time we have a conversation. And that question is, what is your monthly budget for a house payment? That includes everything, your property taxes, your insurance, your mortgage insurance, principal and interest. And back in 2003, we were a one-income family, and our budget was $750. And that mortgage person said, no problem, we can make it happen. And they made our payment $749 and change. And we were so excited. You can imagine. I mean, you guys work with new home buyers, first-time home buyers all the time.
Yeah.
And so excited, like we were just stoked, right? The challenge that happened a year later was the taxes. There was not enough money in our escrow account to pay our taxes.
I've heard this story before.
Yes, so often we get these.
Is it because the appraised value went up, or what
100%
happened?
No.
Okay.
It's because the mortgage industry back then wasn't regulated the same way that it is now. And the mortgage person that we dealt with made our payment the budget that we had. Our payment went up over $1,100 a month, from $750 to $1,100.
Oh my gosh.
And my family almost had to file for bankruptcy. True story.
Wow.
You can call my wife and she'll still cry about it to this day.
Oh my gosh.
It was so hard. So as I started in the mortgage industry, one of my biggest factors is I want to make sure that the same thing doesn't happen to families that happened to me and my family.
Right.
And it's so important to focus on what is that monthly budget and understand that that's the number that matters.
Yeah.
We can figure out the loan amount based on other factors. But on your side of the table and my side of the table, the number that has to matter and be more important than any other number is, what is that monthly payment?
Yeah, especially first-time home buyers. I tell them there are two numbers that are important. One is, what do you qualify for? But if you qualify for a $300,000 mortgage and you want to spend $1,500 a month, that's not going to get a $300,000 mortgage unless you put $150,000 down.
Correct.
Or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So a lot of times people want to focus on different numbers. Right?
Yeah. Yep.
Like the interest rates,
Like the
which are a
interest
big
rates.
thing right now.
Right.
So one quick thing, will you explain what buying down rates are? Because you're seeing that a lot in the ads and sellers are offering that to people. So can you quickly explain that?
Quickly, I don't know. We'll find out.
Okay, all right.
There are basically two ways that you just asked a question. It could kind of go two different
Right.
directions. So one way of buying down a rate would be buying discount points and lowering a rate on a permanent basis. What's really circulating right now is a 2-1 buy down or a 3-2-1 buy down.
Yeah.
And what that is the seller is prepaying the interest for the buyer for 2 years or 3 years. And so you take the difference between, let's just use easy numbers and say the buyer qualified and it was 7% interest rate. Well, for a 2-year buy down, the first year it's going to be a 5%. The next year it'll be 6%. And then the third year to the end of the mortgage would be the 7%. And so what the seller is paying is the interest portion of the payment from 5% to 7% for 12 months. And then from 6% to 7% for the next 12 months. And then in month 36, they have a full payment.
And at that time, they could possibly refinance.
They could actually refinance previous to that point, and that prepayment would just go to the principal on the thing.
Really?
That's
okay.
I hadn't heard that portion.
Right.
Of it, so
Me either.
So here's the variable that a lot of people ask this question is where does that money have to come from, right? And it's in the seller concessions on the purchase agreement. It could also come from a lender credit if there was enough in the interest rate. Right now, I'll just be very clear and transparent, there's not. And then the only other place that it could come from, which I'll never ask, is from the realtor credit on their side as well. And so it's really a benefit if the sellers will pay that along with paying the normal closing costs for the buyer of the loan as well.
Gotcha.
So it's a big piece that's circulating right now. But here's the most important piece about this. You're taking a mortgage that's qualified at the 7% rate in our example a minute ago, and you're only paying a 5% rate for 12 months. And then you're paying a 6% rate for the next 12 months. Just like my story, where my family went from $750 to $1,100, that's a huge payment shock. And so what the McCulloch mortgage team is doing when we have these people is we're actually working together with them to spend that money in their budget so that it can either go to pay down debt, which increases their credit score. So if they refi, they have a better opportunity. Some people are using it to save money, put money aside for different pieces of the puzzle, and different things. Like we're just trying to provide other options so that they're just reallocating where that budget is going, because we're still going to qualify on the higher amount.
Yeah, so you're taking that full budget amount, and if it's not going to the payment, you're putting it to other things that will help them.
Correct.
Okay, that's awesome.
Correct.
That's great. So that 2 years down the road, when they're paying the full percentage, if they still own the home and haven't refied, then that money has been in and been used in their budget the entire time, and it's not a shock to the system.
100% accurate.
That's great.
100%.
Because your story, Charles, that you shared was the exact same story of some grandchildren of very good friends of mine, 20, 21, 22 years old, buy their first new house, get into it, and about a year later, they get contacted and told that their payment was going to increase $500 or $600 a month.
Yeah.
And it was $1,600 payment, as I recall. And that was because the escrow had not collected enough for taxes, and they owed taxes, and then they had to get ready to pay next year's taxes.
Yeah.
Yeah, replenish the escrow
That's
amount
tough.
too, for sure.
Man. So you guys focus on making sure that doesn't happen to your clients.
To the best that we can.
Yeah,
Now,
sure.
The hyper appreciation from the last 2 years that we all believe is
Right.
pretty well settled now. Everybody needs to understand as those tax invoices come out and
Right.
have been coming out, like some of that's out of our control, some of that's out of your
Sure.
control, and they can contact you guys and say, hey, how can I contest this down at the tax appraisal district and so forth. But yes, we want to make sure, and they understand why we're doing what we're doing in the whole process.
Right.
Exact same story. Yeah.
Wow.
I think this episode really will be true to our name. This is real estate 101.
Yep.
And we want to make sure the people that have never done this before can really understand how the process works, how to make that budget, and just know that they still have the ability to go buy a house now instead of rent. And I think that's something that contacting one of us, and you included in that, Charles, that would be when we'd love to send people that way if we get some inquiries after we get this episode up and posted. So
now, Charles, just earlier today, I believe, maybe Ken, maybe you sent around a text message that had information about interest rates had gone down to a month's low rating. I think it was 6.25%.
Wait, this is only like the fifth day in the month. Are you talking about December?
Well, no, the lowest it had been in months, whatever that means.
said that just the news story said they fell back to a multi-month low. That the average 30-year was at 6 point.
Yeah, probably mid-sixes, low to mid-sixes.
Okay. So, Charles, I have a trick question here for you.
Mm-hmm.
Carrie knows the answer. Ken knows the answer. I know the answer. What interest rate do you pay on lease payments?
On a lease, like a rental?
Yeah.
100% interest.
Oh, he knew the answer.
Ding, 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 ding.
100% interest every
Get
month.
another cup of coffee, Charles.
Come on.
So, Charles, I'm curious. You had asked for me to pull some stats.
Yeah.
What do you got to share with us on that?
So I think there's three big pieces in why people need to buy a house. And this goes, I'll ask you the trick question, Joe.
Uh-oh.
Mm-hmm.
When is the best time to buy a house?
Now.
So that's the second answer.
Uh-oh.
The first answer was 20 years ago.
Well, yeah.
That's
And
true.
you know what? 20 years ago, May, was when Susan and I bought our house.
So what was the interest rate? 18%?
Oh, no. No.
You still own that house?
We do.
So I'm not going to get too personal with your numbers, but there's three things, right, that we communicate of why people need to buy a house. And the first one is appreciation is real.
Yeah.
Appreciation is real. The numbers that Carrie ran, I asked her to grab just some random years that I chose. 2006, the average sales price of a house in 2006 was $129,000-ish. In 2007, the average sales price was just under $138,000.
So a little bit of appreciation.
A little bit,
Yeah.
7%. Pretty close to 7% appreciation. And so what appreciation means, if you're listening and you don't understand what appreciation means, is you just earned, because you bought a house a year ago, 7% on your wealth is what it comes down to. That same average price in 2012 was just over $138,000. So between 2007 and 2012, which if you were in the market, you understand what happened there.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
But it's basically the same thing. So it's a 5-6 year wash where you didn't lose money, but a lot of people did. But if you stuck it out, appreciation wins every time. 2013 went up a little bit more, another percent up. But here's where the numbers get really fun. Because of what we call hyper appreciation over the past couple of years, in 2019, the average sales price was $218,000. In 2021, last year, it was $277,000.
Wow.
And just looking at the numbers earlier, we're estimating in 2022 the average price is just over $300,000.
That's in our MLS, basically McLennan County.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Correct.
Yeah.
So, if you bought that house in 2006 for $129,000, and today you reached out to these fine realtors in front of me and said, how much could we sell the same house for? And you're going to sell it for $300,000. You're going to make $270,000. So appreciation is real, and appreciation is going to continue to be real. Okay, so that's the number one reason. The number that I pulled up, or I think I saw it on one of your charts, the average appreciation is about 5%. About 5%. Is that pretty
Year over year,
Yeah.
long term.
long term?
Yeah.
Okay. The second one is predictability. Predictability, because right now, just like Joe said, rent is 100% interest. And you don't know after you sign a year lease what's going to happen in month 13. We signed a lease in an apartment complex for my daughter, and they said, we haven't raised our rent in years. Can't even tell you when the last time we raised our rent was. I said, great, let me sign a year lease. I signed a year lease. Guess what happened on month 13?
Yep.
We haven't raised our rent in years, but guess what? This year we are.
Yeah.
And it happened to everybody. And so predictability is a big deal because, like we were talking about a minute ago, the monthly budget is the monthly budget. So many people live on a budget monthly because that's how, they know how much money they're making. They know how much allocated out to housing costs and so forth. So predictability is a big piece.
And it should be. And you hope people are knowledgeable about budgets and how to maintain that and stay within the budget. And I think that's
Complete.
So I think we need to affirm that that's a good way for them to approach this. So
The third piece is stability. And this is something that doesn't get talked about a whole lot, but it's just reality and it's just very big truth. And so when you buy a house and you move into the neighborhood and you own part of that neighborhood now, you're invested in that neighborhood to make sure that it is a good neighborhood. Your kids statistically will do better in schools if you own a home versus rent because of the stability that the kids have. They're not constantly moving every 6 months or 18 months or whatever the case is. And so you'll see you'll see higher grades in school districts with a higher home ownership piece of the puzzle. And then you obviously relationships, right? You grow deeper relationships when you own a house because you're not going anywhere.
Right.
That's not the plan. The plan is we're here and we're going to move forward. So I will share another story with you. I visited with a young couple. They're getting married next year, and they're looking at buying a house. And I asked them, they're both about 22 years old, 23 years old. And I asked them how much they had saved, and you would be very surprised and very proud to know that these guys have some money saved. And I said, let's talk about that number. Let's talk about the budget. What is the budget? And they don't live together, right? They're not married yet. They're going to move into their brand new house when they get married. That's their goal. And so they have to do some thinking, right? They both graduate in May, and one of them already has a job lined up in the medical field, and the other one is still looking, right? And I said, well, let's talk about what does that monthly budget need to look like. You guys know I was a financial advisor prior to becoming a mortgage banker, and so a lot of financial advisors will coach to be at 29 or 30% or lower. Now, there's not a guideline associated with that number, so please understand that. But a third of your money or less towards your housing payment. And so we just did some math, and a third of their expected income payment was significantly more than what they could comprehend paying for a mortgage payment. And they said, what would it look like for about $1,800 to $2,000 a month? And we know that that's probably $175,000 to maybe a $210,000, $215,000 house, depending on where it's located and what it looks like. And so they're going to window shop in that range. And one of the other numbers that we were talking about just a few minutes ago was the percentage of houses that are on the market that are selling for $200,000 or less, because that $2,000 a month number seems to be a very consistent number that we field when we ask that question, what is your monthly budget? And so in 2021, it looked like about 40%, just less than 40% of the houses were $200,000 or less. Previous to that, the numbers were above 50%. And then back in 13 and before that, they were above 80%. And so again, appreciation is real, but with appreciation has to come new expectation of reality of what a mortgage payment looks like.
yeah.
Well, because when you're that young, you don't want to be, what do they call it, house poor.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You want to be able to travel and do stuff together and don't have to be, married to your mortgage. So it's probably what their thought is,
But
which
at the
is
same
very
time,
smart, I guess.
how much are they paying for rent in some of the apartment complexes that are around here?
Right.
And so that's something else to think about. Is it better to buy if you have the money saved than it is to rent?
Man, and unless you're planning on moving in just a year or two, probably it's better to buy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, appreciation is still going to cancel out some of those costs
interest
involved.
rates,
It's certainly going to be. We're seeing a lot of people that have bought in the last few years that have turned around and sold, and definitely have reap the extra appreciation just in a few years, where it used to be that 4 and 5 year range. We'd say now it's a good time.
Right.
You're back in a good position with equity in your home, and now we're seeing people that have been able to sell in a year or two for whatever reasons and move up, and some move out, and but it's definitely been a good equation for them when it comes to
I have a new listing coming up that they got a new job out of state, and so they're moving, and we're not planning on moving. They bought less than a year and a half ago, and they're going to make a significant amount of money on the sale of that home, assuming that everything goes well.
Right.
And I told them, and I've told multiple other clients in similar situations, do not ever expect this to happen again. Own a house for 14 months and sell it for a profit.
Right.
Talking about managing expectations, we have a lot of that to try to balance. But, I think you and the budget is certainly a way to keep those expectations in line with, we can find you a $300,000 house, but your budget says about 200 or 250. That's a big difference. That's a big difference.
That's why I encourage people to window shop after they have the conversation with you guys and have the conversation with us. Before you spin your wheels and spend your gas money, because that's not cheap either, let's window shop. Let's see what that looks like. And so that's a big deal. Now, this couple that I met with yesterday, she's talking about furthering her degree towards the doctorate level in the medical field, and she might have to move out of state. And so this is the wisdom of these young, these young folks is they do have money saved. They have really good credit scores because they don't have debt. They said, what if we lived here for 2 years, because I have to live here for 2 years and work in this field before I'm eligible for this. And then I move for 3 years to get the doctorate, and then we move back. Can we lease out the house while we're gone? And the answer is yes. Now, I do want to give this quick disclaimer that I'm not a CPA and I'm not a tax preparer. But from my understanding of what the IRS code is if you live in a house for 2 out of the last 5 years, you can reap significant financial rewards without having to claim capital gains. If it's under that 2-year window, then you have some things that you need to visit with your CPA about. And so for these guys, I was like, look, if you did that and then you came back, and you move back in the house for another year or two, and we just used the 5% average appreciation. They bought it, I think $200,000 is the number we used, but 5 or 6 years down the road, that house was going to sell potentially for $265,000, $270,000. And now, entering into a doctorate profession, you have a choice of where you want to go, where you want to live. You're selling your house. You've already paid down your principal, so you're going to make a fairly significant amount that you can use for a down payment and now move up, or continue to rent the house out and have some cash
And they
flow.
didn't pay down the principal. The renter did.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because they're renting and not buying.
One of the biggest tax advantages of rental properties is depreciation on your property as well. So a lot of people, if you want to get into the rental field, you need to have a conversation with your CPA to see what that could look like for you. On the flip side of that, I had another conversation yesterday with a guy that asked me about loans to flip houses, fix and flip houses. And we had a great conversation, and he said, I've known the guy for probably about 10 or 12 years, and he said, what would you do? And I said, well, Carrie and I, my wife Carrie, not the Carrie on the other side of the microphone, have flipped about 4 houses. And previous to the last 2 years, I would tell you, or during the last 2 years, I would say fix and flip and sell that thing and make some money. Right now, I would encourage you to fix and flip and rent that thing.
And hold.
Okay, well, Carrie,
Receive.
Carrie, it just did that, and my house is not sold, so that's probably going to be next on my list is to rent it out, because these monthly interest payments are killing me.
We did see that last year when we were in Vegas, and they gave us some statistics, and with the appreciation, the hyper appreciation, they said if you can, in those flip situations, hold it for at least 2 years, that it would be dramatically improve your equity and just the overall financial gains from those.
Yeah, I had some investors who bought a home and fixed it and tried to flip it, and the timing was exactly the wrong time because of interest rate hikes.
Yep.
And so a couple of months ago, they decided to take the property off the market and lease it. and they were able to lease it almost immediately for a very nice price for them. And it's a beautiful home, so somebody's getting a good deal leasing it as well. But most of what we deal with are people who buy residential properties to occupy. And
yes.
Charles, let me run this by you. I mean, folks ask us, Ken and Carrie, confirm or deny this, is now a good time to buy? And what I tell them is, hey, interest rates, and this conversation has not been had since it's dropped down to 6.25%, but so it's about 7%. And I would tell them, if you buy now at 7%, which historically is not a bad rate. If you go back long enough, I mean, you're going to find 13, 15, 16% interest rates. So 7 looks really good. But if you buy at 7%, and 2 years from now, the Fed has hiked rates 3 or 4 more times, and interest rates are 9%, how good do you look having purchased at 7%? Right. Pretty darn good. Right. If you buy now at 7%, and over the next couple of years, inflation calms down, and the Fed starts to drop the rate, and it goes back down to 5%, what do you do, Charles?
Refinance. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so the numbers that you're quoting, please know I'm not quoting rates, and I'm not quoting APRs by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah.
It's just
we're making stuff up for examples.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
yes,
so
yes.
The rates that you see from the baseline rates from the government and those kind of things, that's exactly what it is. It's a baseline rate, and then mortgage companies like our company have to add on. They have to make money as well and take care of employees and those kind of things.
Right.
And so when you see those rates and you see that the government's hiking rates, understand that is a baseline rate. A lot of that, when you hear about the Fed raising rates, it's the money that banks borrow between each other. That's what the government's saying. Hey, if you're going to borrow that money from that bank, they're going to charge you this, and so forth and so on. And it is, use the inflation word, it is to slow down the purchasing power, right? I would imagine people are seeing their credit card statements right now and seeing those variable rates go up. If somebody purchased a house within the last 2 years, well, let's say 3 years, and they purchased and they got a 3% rate or a 2% rate, they're sitting back pretty happy, just like what you're saying, right? Rates are up. But if they use an adjustable rate, let's say they used a 3-year adjustable rate, and now that 3 years is coming due. And so those rates are going to go up. It's a gamble that a lot of people take. But you have a win-win situation. You buy now. If rates go up, you still win, right?
Yeah.
Because you bought a house and you have appreciation.
And you said, worst case, you're looking at 5% appreciation. So that takes care of a lot of those. That's right. So.
Can I get a joke in?
Oh, no.
Please.
Nobody wants to laugh.
No, this is a good one. Because I'm all about America, like the good old red, white, and blue.
Charles has a joke, too.
Wait, let me tell mine first.
Okay. Ladies first.
I find it ironic that the colors red, white, and blue stand for freedom until they're flashing behind you. Okay, who's next?
Only you would know that.
Yeah.
Charles, what kind of joke do you have? You have a good joke for us.
I don't know if it's good or not.
Well, it's a dad joke then.
Yeah.
Keep the dream alive. Hit the snooze button.
That's a good one.
Well, guys, we have had a fantastic conversation here with lots of good information. And Charles, you pointed something out that we do need to make folks aware of. We are not trying to give financial advice, legal advice, accounting advice. We're here to tell you stories to help you understand what we go through representing people like you buying and selling properties. If you have specific questions, Ken, are you available for them to call you?
I am always available.
Carrie, how about you? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, me too. We want you, if you have specific questions, give us a holler and let us help you out. But please be careful not to assume that the stories we just told apply to you directly.
Right.
Good disclosure there.
Yeah.
And certainly we can get you in touch with Charles.
Charles,
Yep.
what's your number?
So I always encourage people to call the office number, because if I'm not available, somebody else from the office will answer. And that's 254-304-5520. You can try my cell phone, 744-4627. Like Carrie did with a text message, sometimes that's a little bit more simple. So.
Yep, it is.
Yep.
And you've got, I know I spoke with Brent Schofield last evening, and Amy.
Amy, how you go?
Okay.
And, Caleb Shove, all our loan officers that work on our team.
Okay.
So,
And everyone that I've worked with has done a great job,
I
Charles.
appreciate that.
Yep.
Thank you so much. So,
All right. Thank y'all.
Yes.
Waco Real Estate Podcast 101. We really appreciate you being with us.